episode 19. Hello, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff, and I'll be your host as we listen to eyewitness encounters involving one of the most terrifying cryptids, Dogmen. Our guest tonight is Kevin Malek. Kevin's the founder of the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society. Kevin's here tonight to talk about his investigations with that society as well as various other Dogman-related topics. Kevin, welcome to Dogman Encounters Radio. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, Vic.
Kevin, could you give us a brief bio on yourself?
Sure. My name is Kevin Malek. I'm 42 years old. I live in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. I'm a paranormal historian, and I'm founder of the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society. Me and my fiancee run the Northwoods Paranormal Resource Center, which is also out of Rhinelander, Wisconsin. I'm a contributing writer for Supernatural magazine, and I'm Wisconsin Guardian for Real Encounters. I'm also, at the moment, studying for my certification as a MUFON field investigator.
To start the show off, let's talk at least a little bit about the NWPS, the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society that you founded. I know that you've investigated 3 Dogman encounters recently. One left some pretty interesting prints behind that you looked into. Please go ahead and talk about those.
Okay, well, the first case actually is an older case that comes out of the 80s when we started advertising for the society. For the first 4 years, we were basically a private group, and after them years, we decided to go public, and we started advertising, and that's really when reports started coming in, reports where I would have firsthand knowledge of, opposed to researching other historians' work and whatnot. A man contacted me, and he was telling me that in the 80s, this comes out of Harshaw, Wisconsin, which is in the Northwoods, where down by the creek by his house, they had some canine prints, so the wolf prints, basically, but they were the size of a dinner plate. And he had taken pictures and sent them in to the DNR. They sent him a letter saying that the prints couldn't be identified, and they never sent his photo back. And he doesn't have the negative, so there was nothing to show me, but it was a real interesting account. Talking to the man, he seemed totally genuine. For somebody to go through that kind of trouble to actually, take the pictures and send them to the DNR and inquire, and of course, usually with reports like that, they come back very inconclusive. The second report is actually something I had witnessed. That was at 3:30 in the morning, and it was between actually Harshaw and Tomahawk. There's a long stretch of 51 that's really barren. They rerouted the highway a few years back, and there's nothing built on it. There's no driveways, no businesses, no houses, nothing. It's just highway. It was at 3:30 in the morning. I was heading south, and something crossed the road in front of me. My first thought was that it was a deer because of the size of it. But just as I see this, I realized that this thing I thought was a deer had a canine head. The ears were very prominent, and the muzzle was it was long. And then, of course, the rest of the body, and you realize it's a wolf. And I don't call this a Dogman because I haven't seen it. I saw it on all fours. It wasn't on its hind 2 legs. The reason I feel that this may be something along the lines is because of the pure size of the animal. It was the size of a small pony. Like, I've seen wolves before up here. You'll see them on the highways and stuff from time to time. But this was so much larger, and I was just really in awe. Studying Dogman reports, a lot of the reports mentioned that, the creature will go from standing upright to going on all fours. To me, this is something that kind of fell more into that kind of thing than just what you call a wolf report. And being that I've seen it with my own eyes, I even slowed the car down. This was something that I got a pretty good look at. So there's that. And then the third report is a more recent report we actually got about 3 weeks ago. And this is in the Black River Falls area, which is a little bit south of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. A lady actually had contacted me looking for a paranormal group. They have a residence which happens to be right next door to an Indian warrior burial ground. The reports that come out of this household, I split into 2. The reports in the household seem very ghost or whatever orientated. or spirit-orientated, demonic, kind of possibly. But the reports outside intrigued me as well because there were 3 separate people at separate times who had witnessed a dog creature with red glowing eyes. Them remind me of the reports that you hear around Indian burial mounds. And she says, it's funny you say that because we have one right next door, and it's a warrior burial mound. That to me is more on the spiritual side. You know, nobody's seen it with roadkill, or it was very much a lot of the folklore and the stuff concerning the burial mounds. There are some theories or whatnot that the dogmen are there to protect the burial place of the deceased, and they're there to basically scare off anybody that would defile that area. Whether or not the burial mound, the entities approaching the house, have anything to do with the burial mound or not, that remains to be seen. I know there's another team right now investigating it. In fact, they just got some really interesting shadow play at the house. So, you know, I do believe that there's some paranormal things going on. As far as the whole Dogman thing, to me, I kind of classify it as that because it is a canine sighting. It is unusual. It is, you know, mysterious. It's unexplained. The whole Dogman thing, you know, when you get into werewolves and skinwalkers and just different kinds of things, you know, it all kind of fits into that. So I thought that was really interesting. Now, Wisconsin's full of reports. So is Michigan. I know there's some reports even in Minnesota. The Midwest seems to get more reports than anywhere else. Not to say that reports don't come from everywhere else. They're worldwide, which is really interesting too.
You know what's strange about that? That's not the first instance I've heard where there was a house that was haunted, and outside there was reported dogman activity. That's really strange, as if having to deal with ghosts in your house isn't enough. On top of that, when you go out to the car, you've got to watch out for dogmen. Now that's a bad situation.
Exactly. Right, and you're right, that is kind of a common thing. And, you know, people do, another common thing is people just having these encounters in cemeteries, or seeing these dogmen in cemeteries, which again is not necessarily a burial mound, but it is a burial area, and it is a secret area. That case I just brought up, the third case, that's still being investigated. I know a team, like I said, they went out there last week, and they actually got footage. I know another team is planning on going out there, and me and my fiancee are planning on going out there too later on this month to kind of check it out. So that's going to be interesting to see, just to see the area and talk a little bit more about it with the people that witnessed it. It's going to be really cool.
Oh, it sounds like it. Now, I know that you've put a lot of work into studying the historical significance of canine cryptids. To start at the beginning, please tell us about your research into them and what you've uncovered.
I guess initially I've been into this for most all my life. A lot of the early research was more into the werewolf thing and going back into history with it. For me, I think that, yes, some of the sightings back then may have been dogmen, the actual cryptid that we talk about. Because the difference between werewolves and dogmen would be that werewolves are a person who transforms into a wolf and then transforms later on back into a person for various reasons. As to where the dogmen, that when people call it a dogman and they're referring to it as that, in the cryptid world, is a species of cryptid. Just a species that hasn't been discovered yet and documented. But I think just studying the whole folklore behind it, as a historian, I'm just really intrigued by the history. I can take this literally all the way back to, well, certainly we can take it back to Greek times, BC, with works from like Plato and Herodotus and that whole thing. Back then, of course, there was the whole demigod thing going on, where, you know, the sons of God mated with the daughters of men, that whole thing, and the idea of the Nephilim and the crossbreeding and the making of monsters and whatnot. And that can actually even be taken back to the Book of Giants, which was once a canon in the Bible, which go back thousands and thousands of years. But during Greek and Roman times, this idea of the possibility that there could be a wolf-man mix was something that I think that they all believed in, and it was real to them. And I think there were reasons for it too. You know, it seems to come out in their religion, in their writings, that kind of thing. And then as history goes on, of course, you end up in the Middle Ages. Out of the Middle Ages, you get the whole lycanthropy thing, the idea that someone has a mental disorder where they think they're a wolf, but they really don't transform into one. And yet they'll go out and commit the crimes of that. And also the other thing you get out of the Renaissance and the Middle Ages is the original accounts of skinwalkers, which go back even further than the Native American versions in America. And there you have kind of a druidic thing where somebody is participating in a ritual, a spiritual ritual. They're connecting with some kind of entity with the ultimate goal of becoming kind of morphed with this entity into a beast. And for that reason, that's why a lot of times the reports of werewolves being burned at the stake kind of go hand in hand with the whole witchcraft thing. And the witches being burned at the stakes is because when you're talking about dark rituals behind closed doors to different entities and whatnot, back then that was punishable. But yeah, you know, some of the skinwalker reports or the rituals were, you know, just like the shaman would have their rituals. They'd put the cloak of the wolf on them, expecting that transformation, where then they would go out and do whatever their agenda was. So you see that a lot. And then through history, and then you got, you know, from the Renaissance, time to time you have different sightings, different things are documented. They're documented in the Orient, they're documented in all the European countries. There are so many different names for the werewolf. I know in Italy you got the Benetani, Philippines you got the Eschwang, Limericken is Native American, Hamrammer, Iceland, and of course the Lobezone out of South America. And then, you know, you come into today in modern times here, where now you have all these reports that don't seem so much spiritual. When you hear the reports of somebody seeing a dogman on the side of a road with roadkill. Personally, at least in my mind, I can't see someone doing a ritual for the greater end of going out and finding roadkill. The other thing, too, is, of course, people spot more than one of these creatures. It's not like the Mothman sightings, where it's only just one specific creature. I mean, here we have reports of 2, 3, 4, even as many as 5 being witnessed at one time. You know, and these people take lie detector tests and pass them. And you know, these sightings will happen with more than one person, which rules out hallucination. And then, of course, now we got, you know, hundreds and hundreds of reports, and they come in every year. And several books by different people have been written on them. I personally believe that there's something legitimate to this. I think that there is a cryptid out there that is just as the way it's described. And, of course, reports vary. Some are more, I've heard hyena-like, I've heard jackal-like, some with spots. But I suppose you'd have that in the wolf kingdom anyways. You know, you have dark ones, black ones, gray ones, even white ones. You would expect to probably see the same thing, I would think.
I'm a firm believer, Kevin, in the adage, where there's smoke, there's fire. Going back in time, for these people that were reporting seeing werewolves, it really makes you wonder, they couldn't have all been crazy. Having said all the things that you've said about werewolves, dogmen, skinwalkers, do you think that there is a divide between the 3 types of canine cryptids, or do you think there is an overlapping where people saw one and mistook it for another?
I believe both is happening. I think there can be some kind of divide. For me, I tend to divide them into 3 camps, and that's the werewolves, which are actually more rare than the dogman camp, which would be the cryptid camp. And the third one would be the whole spiritual, whether it's a skinwalker kind of thing, or if it's someone seeing a black dog entity with red glowing eyes, a larger dog kind of thing. I think there's a couple different things going on, actually. I think spiritually there could be something going on. You know, like if you do perform the right rituals with the right whatever, or like with the Indian burial grounds, or how they would perform these rituals so that these things would protect the areas. I do believe that we are spirit beings having a human experience, and I think every animal has spirit. That's my personal belief. And it's also my personal belief that spirit isn't destroyed when the body, the physical, is destroyed. That spirit continues on. If that being true, then all the cryptids we talk about would also have spirit. Would some of these people possibly see spirits of dogmen? Or maybe the spirits of the dogmen are kind of congregated around burial areas? Possibly. Some people believe that demons are actually the spirits of the Nephilim out of the Bible. So, just the idea that spirit persists afterwards. Now, if I were a dogman, if I had a spirit and if it were to persist afterwards and someone were to see it momentarily at a burial mound or whatever, or in a cemetery or whatever, that's certainly a possibility, I guess. I wouldn't rule it out.
I think I see where you're coming from on that.
I study other things too besides cryptozoology. I do study demonology and theology and parapsychology and ufology and all these different ologies. And I find that the more you study them, there's a point where they will cross or originate from, or everything ties into everything else. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Touching on that topic right there, everything ties into everything else. The more time I spend looking into the whole dogman phenomenon, the more it happens where I'll be talking to someone who's seen one of these things, and they'll go down the list of things that they noticed or things that happened, and they'll say something that rings a bell with something that who knows how many other eyewitnesses have said that they saw or experienced. And then they'll go on talking about the encounter and hit on something else that rings a bell with something that's commonly reported being seen or heard. So the more you do this, as you obviously have noticed, the more everything seems to fit together like a glove. That is, if you're actually talking to someone that did actually see what they claimed that they saw. Unfortunately, as I'm sure you've already experienced, you've got your fair share of charlatans that don't mind wasting other people's time with false claims of something that they witnessed.
Right. You do have them out there. They are out there. I guess overall, I think the truth stands on its own. And eventually the charlatans are weeded out. And usually fairly quickly. It doesn't take long before someone's catching on to what the truth is. I find, however, on the flip side, when I talk to people who have had paranormal experiences, I find they're truthful. They don't need to fabricate things because the experience they had in itself is so unique. I talk to people and you can see the emotion behind their experience. You see some fear, some amazement, that kind of thing. I tend to believe that when people describe their most unique experience in life, they don't make stuff up around it. They're giving you what they interpreted as their experience. And I think most people generally, if they come out in front and said, yeah, I saw this, I think there's something to that. I think they would know inside if they were hallucinating or not, If they've seen something and they feel like they're hallucinating, they're going to be telling people about it, generally speaking. And then you have reports where multiple people see it at the same time. Yeah, I think that people generally, when you have an experience, it's not like they're going to forget more so than any other experience they'd have. They're going to remember the same things. In fact, sometimes they remember details really well because the experience was so amazing. They described the things that really stuck out to them. And then for us as historians, we look at their reports and we try to identify with other reports to connect the dots, kind of, so to speak. But yeah.
That all makes really good sense. Let's shift gears here a little bit, Kevin, and talk about a topic that I think is really interesting. And from talking to you before, I found out that you also are fascinated by this idea. On the whole missing 411 topic with David Paulides, what's your take on that and the possibilities that it might be Dogman that's responsible for a lot of these cases?
This is a really interesting topic. David Paulides' Missing 411 book, I think, is amazing. He has spent over 7,000 hours documenting and researching this phenomenon. That phenomenon is people that go missing from state parks and from forest preserves and other areas and such. But generally the state parks, what he noticed early on was that these state parks didn't keep records of missing person cases in their parks, which is kind of unusual in itself. And the other thing, too, was that anytime anyone tries to get information about missing person cases that originate on government properties, like state parks and whatnot, they're met with resistance, which is unusual, too. I think there was something going on with that. And in the reports you talk of, just to let people know that are listening, so they know what we're talking about. Hundreds of people have been abducted over time from state parks. And the weird thing is usually it's children. There have been cases of adults being abducted too, but what's really bizarre about these are the correlations they all have with each other. And that is usually these abductions happen right under the nose of the parents. And sometimes they find the children 15, 20 miles away from where the abduction took place, all scratched up, with no clothes on. There have been cases where they found children that are still alive. I know they found one girl, she was still alive, I think she was 9 or 10. When she came back to after, she had been in the hospital and stuff, and they asked her, well, who took you? What happened? And she said, a wolf took her. And that the wolf took her really far away from her family. During the night, the wolf had cuddled with the child and kept it warm. And it's not the only time, by the way, that a child has mentioned a wolf creature. It's happened a couple times. I know another child had mentioned a bear-like creature. Again, we're talking probably ears pointed or nuzzle, furry. In other words, when I first started hearing about these cases, my mind right away went to the whole alien abduction thing. Abductions, this has got to be alien. But after looking into all these reports, and this is my conclusion, I'll say that this isn't necessarily David Paulides' conclusion. If you read his book, he documents the accounts, but he won't offer his version of what he thinks it is. He leaves that open to the reader. I really like that. But when I started thinking about these reports as being Dogman related was when I learned about what some of these children that were actually found before they were dead talked about and what they reported. And people say, missing person reports, how did he find out about these? Well, libraries always keep data on missing persons in their area, even if there's a state park in the area. It usually ends up in the paper. So over 7,000 hours of researching this, a lot of it was going to libraries and digging up the information the old-fashioned way. And he did so, and he was able to come up with all these accounts. And they're usually the same. The child's gone. They'll try to follow the trail. At some point, they'll find maybe the clothes have been stripped off the child, clothes here and there, and they find the pants inside out, usually, that kind of thing. And then at some point, the dogs lose the trail, almost every time. And then they'll set up a grid, maybe like a 5-mile grid around the area where the child went missing. And then, usually they don't find these children within the grid you would think, if it's a child wandering off on its own getting lost. They're not going to go up 2, mountains and be found halfway up a third mountain 20 miles away. But how did they get there? Like I said, usually I think what happens is whatever's abducting these children isn't able to care for the child properly. And I think the child eventually will die from exposure or just from the abuse of being carried 20 miles by a dogman. Whatever the case is, and they find these children dead. And it's not like they're finding them eaten up. It's not like the classic werewolf pop culture thing. And when they do find missing person bodies that are scattered, maybe sometimes they'll find like bones or teeth or whatever. The thinking is that the child has died, and then just by natural causes or just by natural nature, any carcass within a week, will be dispersed and rotted and whatnot. Animals wander off with different parts and that kind of thing. But they're not seeing it's really interesting too, because the question is, why are these children even being abducted? And it's not just one or two. We're talking, many. There's a lot of cases out there like this. I find it interesting that the government doesn't document this stuff. They don't have information on these kind of things. It's almost like they refuse. They kind of just turn a blind eye towards it. And that tells me that there's something to this. If they were to admit it openly, well, now nobody's coming to state parks. And then, of course, that's loss in revenue overall. I think there's several reasons why they could probably want to keep this hush-hush. That's just my take on it. But it's really fascinating. And again, when children mention, it was a large wolf or it was a large dog that abducted me and carried me all this way. Well, we know a dog can't carry a person, or a wolf can't carry a person unless they can walk upright and carry a person with their arms, basically. And it's just really interesting. I think it's really fascinating.
Kevin, I want to hit on something that you alluded to. If these kids and people, let's not forget that men sometimes are being abducted too in these parks.
Right, even grown men that know how to handle themselves in woodland environments.
That's right, even grown armed men are being abducted sometimes. If that's the case, if this is an instance where dogmen are behind this, and so many of these victims are being found uneaten, just dead from exposure, for example, why do you think dogmen would be motivated to do this then?
The only thing that I can, so far, my brain can really wrap around would be maybe it's some kind of, maybe it could be a motherly instinct thing. And I only say this because being a paranormal historian, I study all types of just unexplained or bizarre phenomenon. When different animal species will befriend themselves, or like, maybe like a lion will breastfeed or nurture a small deer it found, after its cubs had died, and it still has a motherly instinct in it. It comes across a small fawn that doesn't have a mother, and instead of eating it, the motherly instinct kicks over. Across the globe, there are a lot of different variations of this. Different animals who befriend each other and love each other. As far as the children go, maybe they take the children and they want to come somehow obviously they're showing some kind of care for the children, if they're keeping them warm at night, if they're feeding them berries or that kind of thing. It doesn't explain why armed grown men get taken out. That doesn't explain that. So I guess that's the only thing I could really come up with at the moment. It's really bizarre, and I don't understand the reason why. Maybe they take the child because it's unique, because it's different, because maybe there's a female dogman with a motherly instinct. But then after she abducts the child, over the course of a couple days, it's obvious that dogmen cannot care for children, human children, and the child then dies from exposure and is just left.
It's a really interesting topic, and it really is hard to answer, but your idea about it being a situation with the children, that is, where maybe it's a female dogman that's abducting them and it's because of a motherly instinct type thing, that's an angle that I never had even considered before. So that's interesting that you mentioned that. Like you even alluded to, with the grown men that are being abducted, it wouldn't make sense in that instance. But all these cases of people being abducted, there are some, David mentioned, where people are being eaten. There's that one moose hunter that was in Alaska, if memory serves, and he was supposed to be the most experienced big game hunter in North America. That's what I believe David Paulides said. That man was found eaten. There were bears in the area, but in none of the bear scat were any of his remains found. So it was something else that they were convinced that had eaten him. Now, in that instance, it sure makes you wonder if that might not have been a dogman attack.
It seems to me there are two primary cryptids in North America. I believe there's more than two upright cryptids, but the two primary ones are really the Bigfoot and the Dogman. As far as what are you going to run into in the woods? I'm not saying that people can't run into other things. I know people run into all kinds of things. It seems to me that the Bigfoot generally aren't as aggressive as the Dogmen. The Dogman encounters seem to be more aggressive in nature. There's another case that pops to my mind, and this was in the Yukon. It was the same kind of thing. This guy had gone out hunting, a total man of the woods, basically. He knew his stuff. He's the kind of person, if anyone's going to survive out there, it's going to be this kind of guy. Goes out there, they find him later, say half consumed. And that kind of thing, it just may be being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I guess the question would be, whoever killed this person, was their intent to eat the person too? Or was it just to kill them because of territory's sake? It seems to me that animals are usually territorial over their own species, generally not of other species. When we talk about Bigfoot, now we're talking primate. When we talk about Dogman, there's a more bestial kind of thing we associate with the Dogman. In other words, what would be smarter, a Dogman or a Bigfoot? I'm inclined to think a Bigfoot is probably overall more intelligent, but that's just a hypothetical assumption. Were they killed by a Dogman and then consumed by a Dogman? Dogmen eat meat. Not to say that they can't eat. We know dogs will eat vegetables. I've seen my childhood dog used to eat grass, wild grass, sometimes. I guess there's something in vegetables that they can use for the digestive system or whatever. But I think overall they're probably meat eaters. I think overall they're probably more wolf-like than man-like. Because if they were more man-like than wolf-like, we would probably have more interaction with them. And we don't. I tend to think that they are very bestial. But yeah, it's really interesting. what interests me again is the whole cover-up aspect of it. Our government has hangars filled with millions of files, on everything that they don't want people to know about, and it's unfortunate. What are in them folders are a lot of the answers and things that are kept from us or things that they don't want us to know about, but would answer so many questions we have.
It is frustrating. There's no denying that. Now, to back up a little bit here, Kevin, you mentioned a topic I want to hit on here. You talked about the different types of bipedal cryptids that are cruising around the wilderness in the U.S. here, and around the world for that matter. As far as dogmen go, I'm convinced that there are two different types, which I'm sure you've heard me talk about several times on my previous shows. I'm convinced you've got a canine type and you've got a type 3. I don't just blindly come to that conclusion. I've come to that conclusion because of all the different eyewitnesses that I've spoken with that claim that they have seen both types. Your type 3s with the hominid-style leg structure and your canine types with the canid-style legs. Coming from Wisconsin, I don't know of very many accounts where people have reported seeing type 3s with that hominid-style leg structure, but I do know of some that have occurred there. In fact, there are people that believe the Beast of Bray Road was a type 3 instead of being a canine type, whereas the Michigan Dogman, in every instance that I've heard reported, it's always believed that Michigan Dogmen are canine types. What's your whole take on this canine type versus type 3 topic?
Well, one possibility would be that the canine types are the cryptid types and the type 3 types may be the other type. Okay, let's say werewolves exist and someone is actually transforming from a person to a wolf and back to a person again. Would their structure be identical to a dogman? Probably not. Is that an explanation? That could be. Another one could be, sometimes people report it was dog-like, but it was also baboon-like. And to me, when you talk about baboons, now you're talking about primates again. Could there be a break in the dogman at some point? That's possible, too. I wouldn't totally rule it out, but it's probably unlikely. That's a good question. I think that's one of the questions that we won't know for sure for a while. But yeah, it's possible. Or maybe, like I said, we have, we know there are variations, for instance, with Bigfoot. Where I'm from, in Northern Wisconsin, in the Midwest, most of the Bigfoot sightings tend to be of tall, brown hair. We'll use hair as an example. The hair in our region is generally brown, tan, like a Chewbacca color, like a wood paneling color. You go down to Florida and Georgia and the Everglades and in the South, and now they have the skunk ape with the reddish color and shorter, again, and that's where evolution kind of like fits the area for where it's at. You go to the Rocky Mountains and out towards California, and they see a lot of black Bigfoot, where the fur is black, and it seems a little more husky. Going around the world, you have the Yeti, where it's taken onto its environment. The evolution is taken over at some point where there's a break, and the hair is the dirty white color or a grayish kind of color to kind of blend in with the habitat, the snow or the mountains of the Himalayas and stuff. So could it be that dogman has these different variations? Absolutely. I do think so. For instance, the lobezone down in South America tends to be generally shorter description. You don't get these 8-9 foot tall descriptions that you see, like for instance, where I'm at. Within the last month, I heard about a report here in Wisconsin where there was a train conductor in the southern Wisconsin, and he was going along on the tracks there, and he saw a dogman, but he described you as a werewolf-looking thing, 7 feet tall, on the tracks. And then, of course, he went on to call it into his dispatch. Say, yeah, you'll never believe what I saw. I just saw this wolf thing walking on 2 legs on the tracks. So yeah, I think go around the world, you're going to find different variations. And you may find that at some point, if we're talking about tens of thousands of years of evolution, or even more than that, hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, if there was a break at some point, the dogman species, and if it weren't better in one environment to retain a canine, more of a wolf kind of thing, and maybe in another area it kind of develop more into a walking primate leg kind of thing. The interesting thing to me is that they have primate-like hands. They seem to be able to grasp door handles, they can cup their hands to drink water, these kind of things that a dog just cannot do. Yeah.
That's something, Kevin, that I'll never understand, i.e. the variances in their appearance. Another thing that is strange, not only is it the variance in their appearance that I find strange, but also the variances in their behavior. For example, the dogmen that are reported being seen up in Canada, not only do they seem to be larger, much larger in size than the ones that are reported down south, for example, they also seem to be a lot more likely to be reported chasing cars. That's another one of the trends I've noticed over time on what to expect from different regions and whatnot. As far as size goes, the ones up in Canada, they seem to be pretty big. The ones down south, I forgot the one, what's the name of the type of dog man that you said that was, I believe, in South America, I believe, that was around 5 feet tall?
Lobezone.
Lobezone.
Yeah, in South America they call it the Lobezone. That's, I guess, I don't know my Spanish, but it must be Spanish for wolf man or wolf someone, maybe dog man or something. But that's what they call it. And again, yeah, the reports aren't of these 8 feet tall, scary things out of a monster movie. Well, they are, I suppose, any dogman sighting would be something out of a monster movie, but you know what I'm saying? They're not as big and as, I guess intimidating would be the word I'm looking for. If I see a dogman my own size, yeah, that's interesting, and of course I would be on guard. Now, if I saw one 9 feet tall, that's a different story. You know, I would definitely back up. And when you talk about, you know, things like chasing cars and stuff, that kind of goes back to their intelligence. Are they more dog-like or are they more man-like? I mean, they certainly can do things that are more man-like. Just the fact that they're so elusive. We have wolves around here, and you don't see them that often. They're elusive. They're always on the move, and they know where to go, where man is and where man isn't. If you're one to believe in the Bible, you know, and then it says God put the fear of man into all animals. Like you, I believe there's a kernel of truth to every legend, folklore report, you know, whatever. So, yeah, I think that the dogman naturally would probably stay away from us just like the wolves do, you know, because we're potentially dangerous to them. Now, if there's a case where, like you said, we're on their turf, we're in the middle of nowhere, you know, like some of these guys that go deep woods hunting and they don't return, that may be something different where the whole pack is responsible for taking out a lone hunter or whatever. Who knows?
You know, there are so many things about what these things do, about what dogmen do, that I'll never understand. To touch on what you were just mentioning about having a fear of man, there are instances that have been reported where it would appear a lone dogman broke its concealment to approach several adults, several men that were armed even, when it could have stayed hidden the whole time. Things like that I will never understand. Now, granted, a dogman shouldn't know what a gun is, so just because they're armed, it wouldn't make sense that would make much of a difference on whether it decided to attack or not. But for what would appear to be a lone dogman to aggressively approach several grown men, that just does not make sense to me. If it does do that, then in my opinion, it's pretty clear that dogman does not have any fear of man.
I think each situation is different. We don't know how territorial these things are, really. Not always understanding the motives behind them. Every dogman encounter or sighting usually they're not all identical. There's so many differences, variations, and that kind of thing. You know, in the particular case you're talking about, or cases, I should say, where dogmen have approached more than one person, or where they come at them kind of aggressively. I know there was one report where a lady, she was with somebody, and they saw something on the side of the road, hunched over, eating roadkill or whatever, and it turned and looked at them, and of course it was a dogman, and then it approached their car. And then, out of fear, she gunned the car at it. Like you say, that's just crazy. You know, it's almost like some of them don't have fear for their own safety. There's just something else on their mind. Like, there's something else they're focusing on, and it's not their own safety at that point. approaching things they don't understand, that kind of thing. Like I said, there's approaching a bunch of men with guns. And I'm sure there are dogmen out there that know what guns are. You guys hear wolves close to their house and they go outside and shoot a couple rounds off or whatever, just to let the wolves in the area know that, hey, don't come too close, or you'll be experiencing some of this.
Yeah, that would leave an impression, that's for sure. Let's switch things up a little bit here, Kevin. I want to make sure we cover more on the NWPS. If an eyewitness contacts the NWPS and they report having had a dogman encounter, tell us about the chain of events that unfold from you getting that phone call to when you find yourself out in the field investigating that encounter.
Okay, somebody calls us. Usually I like to meet with them. We'll generally talk on the phone. Or usually the phone or Facebook is people will contact us on. Them are the two primary ways we have listed. Sometimes when they call me, they're out of the area, and this happens to us actually quite a bit, where we'll get calls from not just from our own district, which is the top third of Wisconsin. That's primarily the area we cover. Like, for instance, this Black River Falls case, that's out of our area. So from what I do then is I talk to the lady, and a lot of it, especially with initial contact, I mean, people are like, please don't think I'm crazy when I'm telling you this. And as, when I remind them, I talk to people that tell me that every day. I don't think you're crazy. Just tell me what happened, tell me what you saw. There's no judgment here. They'll go on to tell me what happened. Now, if they're out of our area, that's when I get on Facebook or the phone and I find a group in their area that will take it on. I'm familiar with dozens of groups in Wisconsin and groups actually all over the U.S. for that matter. Being a guardian for real encounters keeps me in touch with all that. But what I'll do is I'll find a team that actually, and it's got to be a team that will deal with the cryptozoological aspect of it. Also, not all paranormal groups will do cryptozoology. A lot of them are just ghost hunting, or some of them are just UFO, that kind of thing. We're all of it. Anything paranormal we'll take on. If it's in our area, then at that point I meet with them. What we do is generally how we go about it is we'll do a preliminary investigation where we'll go over and we'll talk with the people, and that's when they can really get in detail with us about what they saw, and gives us a chance to, I guess, maybe read their body language a little bit, get a feel for, if this is real or not. And we'll also like to ask them to show us where things happen. Take us to the spot where you've seen something. That's the preliminary investigation. And then what we do is we'll go back and we'll do a regular investigation or a night investigation where we'll set up equipment and cameras and try to do different things to make contact. Now, we haven't gone that far with any dogman report yet. It hasn't gone to the point where we have actually gone out to investigate that specific site as far as try to collect more data or evidence in the real moment. Now, we did have one case that came to us from the Potawatomi Nation. They had gotten some interesting vocalizations. They were camping out at a lake that they consider a very spiritual lake or whatever. Next to it is old Indian burial mounds, and next to that is an old Indian bowl. It's called Indian bowl. It's where they would do powwows and that kind of thing. Kind of like a earthen stadium, if you will. Maybe a hall or something that was kind of designed for that. But anyways, they were out camping one night, and we even checked into this. There are no houses anywhere in this area. This is an area where Indian land meets state forest land. I believe it's the Shawangha National Forest, which goes on for miles and miles and miles. So, and they were camping one night, and 3 a.m, got these really interesting vocalizations. And we had planned on going to investigate this, and basically we got winter a month early this year. We ran out of time. We didn't get a chance to go out there. We wanted to go out there and spend the night out there and try to see if we could try to determine what this was. Initially, my thinking was it was Sasquatch, but once I learned that there was Indian burial mounds involved and that whole aspect of it, then my mind started thinking, well, could this possibly be, could they have dogmen? It was a possibility, but we didn't get out there. We want to. I expect next year we'll probably make our way out there because I'm really stoked to get out there and check it out. And that's maybe not even an hour from where we're at. But then anyways, yeah, and then we do a preliminary investigation. And then we follow it up with kind of like a reveal where we'll share what we have found and our conclusions with the client. Most of the cases we do are generally haunted cases. Unfortunately, our team doesn't have a cryptozoologist at the moment. I would love to find one up in Northern Wisconsin. If there's any cryptozoologists out there in Wisconsin, feel free to get a hold of me. That would really add on to our team. But anyways, we haven't really got anything yet to where we've been able to take it to the full stretch of it, all 9 yards or whatever. But that would be what we would do. And then from there we would do, I guess, we present, the evidence and our findings, and then we ask what they want to do from that point on. I suppose, like, with the cryptozoology case, we're not expected, like, sometimes people are like, well, can you get rid of it? In that kind of case, like, we have no control over that. There's nothing we can really do to prevent these things from coming around your property or where you're at or your house or wherever you saw it. Or I think one thing we can do is give people knowledge, and knowledge alleviates fear. That's something that we can do for a lot of families. First of all, yes, there are people out there that aren't laughing at you. And yes, other people have had reports like this. And I can sit down and explain, and talk with them. And yeah, you're not the only one that have had these reports. Other people have seen these things. You're not crazy. That's what we do.
Kevin, I really appreciate your approach to all this. It sounds like the two of us are concerned with a lot of the same things. Just like what you mentioned there when I'm talking to someone that's just had an encounter, or maybe even has had an encounter some time ago, your heart just really goes out for these people. You can tell they're so rattled and so shook up by what they've seen and what they've been through. And some of the things that you say can help them feel better and bring some type of a normalcy back to their life, but that you're never going to be able to bring them back to where they were before they even had that encounter. And I'm not sure about you. I get the impression that you feel the same way, but for me, it's just horrible. I hate the idea that you can only do so much,
Right. I agree with you with that. And to me, that's one of the things, like, as far as determining hoax or not, when people are genuine, you can feel it. There's something real about it. One of the members of our society is a psychotherapist, and we're really grateful to have him, because for any type of paranormal experience that leaves a person shaken up, for us to have that resource, to have, they can talk to somebody, we don't send them off somewhere where they got to pay $100 an hour to talk to someone who might laugh at them anyways. If they come to us, and if there's any kind of trauma or traumatic kind of, is trauma even the right word? Just if they're really upset and they really need to talk, not only can they talk with me or Jenny at the resource center, but, we can also have them, if they wish, they're welcome to talk to a psychotherapist as well, who won't laugh at them. I mean, there's a reason he's with us, and we're really grateful to have him aboard. So, that's something else too, that, half of it is studying the phenomenon, but a lot of it, especially when you work in the field like this, when you deal with the people, it's almost like you become a counselor in a sense. And for us, it's a way we can give back to the greater good. Just the whole Paranormal Society thing in general. We're a greater good nonprofit organization. It's about helping people. And I think that's the bottom line, is helping the person cope and deal with the situation they've had. Sometimes we can help, sometimes we can't. But we can always arm them with information, and that's what the resource part of the resource center is all about. People are free to come over, tap into our library, our resources, our, everything that we know here, and things that we can share with them, and that kind of thing. And, of course, if anyone wants to join our society, they're welcome to do that, too.
Having that therapist as part of your team, that's got to be one heck of a nice resource. I really respect and appreciate your approach to this, your concern for eyewitnesses and helping to make their lives better, and the sympathy you obviously show. That's really impressive.
Well, it's important. I think that's the difference between the greater good paranormal groups out there and the ones that aren't greater good. The ones that are in it for themselves. A lot of times we'll get calls from families that are like, we've had other teams out here before, but it's like they come out here just to collect evidence, and that's it. And if they don't get evidence, we never hear from them again. And if they get evidence, we never hear from them again. It's just like they're out there for themselves, and to us, the reveal isn't the end of the investigation. we stay in contact with our clients, even after the cases are, quote unquote, solved, if you will, or, the case is closed. We still stay in contact just to make sure that everything is going good. To me, that's what I love so much about working with the society and the resource center, is that we can make a difference and we can help the community and the people through our studies that we do and the resources that we have available to us on many angles. Like I said, we're getting involved with MUFON now, which is a mutual UFO network. Our ufologist consultant is the state director for MUFON here in Wisconsin.
Wow.
And as time goes on, we'll be working more and more with them. Currently, like I mentioned at the beginning, I'm working on my certification to become a certified field investigator. Nobody's perfect by any means, but again, just the variation that we encompass. Everything, like I say, our society has 6 categories. That's ghosts and hauntings, cryptozoology, which is the Dogman thing and everything, aliens and UFOs, and then we have 3 subcategories. And the subcategories usually go hand in hand with the main categories. And one of them is spirit science, which is metaphysics, basically. The second one would be theology, which is religion. And the third one is conspiracy theory, which is basically politics, I guess you would call it. And some people say, well, why conspiracy theory? I say at the end of every conspiracy theory seems to be some kind of alien government cover-up of some kind, or some kind of weirdness about it. And like in the case we were talking earlier, with the missing people reports in state parks, again, you have a conspiracy theory coming down to something that seems to be paranormal in nature. And when I say paranormal, I just mean unusual, unexplained, unknown, that kind of thing. But them are the 6 topics we really focus on, and we find that pretty much encompasses the gambit of what you can find in the paranormal. Whether people are having sightings with ghosts or shadow people or Bigfoot or Dogman or being abducted or seeing lights in the sky, all of it. Anything that society would laugh at them about. These things really happen. They do happen, and they happen to all walks of life. To doctors, to lawyers, judges, to law enforcement, as well as every other walk of life. These things are real. They are out there. There are things that go bump in the night.
It sounds to me like no matter what type of paranormal phenomenon someone might have experienced in northern Wisconsin, sounds to me like your organization's got all those bases covered.
We got most of them covered. Cryptozoology, we don't have a cryptozoologist. We do have a ufologist. We have a theologist. We don't have a demonologist yet. And we don't have a like I say, we don't have a cryptozoologist. However, we do have the resources. We're so in touch with the paranormal network in general and the different branches of that. If we do come across anything, let's say demonic, and sometimes when we're talking about creatures with red glowing eyes resemble, these things may in fact sometimes be demonic in nature and not physical. And the same thing with cryptozoology. If we get any reports where I need a cryptozoologist, I don't have one in the area, I don't have one in my group, but there are cryptozoologists throughout the country that I'm friends with that I know, I talk to. They would be glad to help me with anything I ask them to help with. And that's part of the For Real Encounters approach too, is if we can't help them, if we're not in our own area, if let's say they're in a different area, we can find people and we have the resources to help people find the right people to talk to. And that's why we get involved with both CSI, paranormal, city sightings investigations, and For Real Encounters. Some of the 2 larger societies we work, or groups we work with, organizations, making sure that everybody has access to real, credible investigators and that kind of thing. I can send anybody out to any case, but I want to send the right people out to the right cases. And there's only half the groups out there I would even recommend. The other half I totally wouldn't even recommend. Their hearts aren't into it. They have other motives and other reasons, which is fine. That's them. That's them on their own. They can do their own thing. Over time, we've learned which groups and which people are really dedicated, opposed to the ones that are just out there trying to make a buck or whatever the case may be.
Well, before we close this show out here, Kevin, do you have any Dogman encounters that you know about from your area that you could share with the audience?
There were so many reports. Let's see. Well, the first one that pops to my mind, and I think it pops in my mind is because I was reading about it again yesterday. Wisconsin, there's a lot of roadkill. Everyone I know has hit a deer at least once. And they have people that go out and collect these deer. It was late at night. One of the road workers had stopped and picked up a deer, and he threw it in the back of his truck. And he was sitting there filling out a report. He felt his truck move a little bit. And at first he thought it was wind or whatever, and he blew it off, and he kept filling out his report. And all of a sudden, bam! Something hit his truck. That's when he sat up and took notice, and he looked in his rearview mirror, and he could see what appeared to be like a wolf or a hairy creature reaching into the truck, trying to get at the carcass that he just threw in the truck. Once he saw that, it spooked him, and he gunned the truck. Well, as he gunned the truck, the creature was able to, the creature had enough of a hold on this deer that the truck took off, and the deer fell out of the truck as it took off. And of course he took off, and the creature, which was reported to be a Dogman, had the deer to himself at that point, had taken the deer or whatever. So that's a really interesting report, I think, and it's pretty neat. Stuff like that. I mean, sometimes there are reports where you almost just can't make them up. When you hear them, or you hear little details about them, it's like, yeah, I would have never thought of that, or it's really interesting, or, that kind of thing.
If memory serves, that was Steve Kruger that happened to. The only thing about that encounter that I just will not be able to understand, no matter how much I rack my brain trying to wrap it around, that Steve said that he went back later on to try and look for the ramp, the metal ramp that was in the bed of that truck, because he was financially responsible for it. I'm sorry, but if I'm sitting in the cab of that truck, that Ranger, and I see something like that reaching into the bed, pulling that deer out, I don't care how much that ramp cost. I'm not going to go back to look for the metal ramp. I don't understand that aspect of it.
I don't remember what time of day he did that.
It was late at night. It was, I think, 1 a.m.
I would think the average person would wait at least until morning.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that just does not make sense. If I remember right, it was around 1 a.m. It was well after dark when that happened.
Yeah, it was dark. I remember that detail. Yeah, that is interesting. Most people don't return to the site, especially at the same night.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think he went back just an hour after that encounter had happened, which that's not that much time. That just does not make sense to me.
Right, and another thing is I would certainly, if I were to go back, I think I would take a squad with me or something. I mean, especially considering he works for the government, you figure like a DNR, not around here the DNR wear guns, they're cops. You figure he'd have somebody with him going back, like, look, I just had this encounter, this freaky thing happened, I lost my ramp, can you come back out with me? Can you help me look for this thing or whatever? Something.
I'm not calling the man a liar, don't get me wrong.
Right, exactly. We're just, at that point, we're just kind of like, speculating, trying to, it's just us trying to wrap our brains around the whole thing. For me, I certainly wouldn't go back by myself unarmed, that's for damn sure. I'm not pro-kill. There's two camps. There's no-kill and pro-kill. I like the no-kill camp. I like the idea that eventually somebody will find one, whether it be a Sasquatch or a Dogman. Someone will, either someone's going to hit one with a vehicle or something, and the report's going to get out before it can be covered up. The kind of thing where it won't be able to cover it up, and they'll actually have a body and something for science, where they'll be forced to admit that, yes, this thing is real. Personally, I don't like the idea of murder. To me, it's like, if there's anything human about, even if there's not anything human about them, just going out and gunning it down for science, I would think that we could find a body. People die, things die so many different ways. It doesn't need to be murder to get a body. That's just my take on it. But when we go out, I'll at least have pepper spray, and usually like pepper spray and some kind of buck knife or something, just for protection. Because, although we don't have, like I said before, we haven't had any Dogman reports that we've gone out and fully, like, when I say investigate, I mean even spend the night out there and do the whole complete investigation. But we look at different areas. We'll go out and squatch and stuff, and this is Northwoods, Wisconsin, and there's a lot of woods around here. There's a lot of, areas where man doesn't tread on too often. My thing is, when you look at the Earth at nighttime from space, and you can see all the city lights, that tells you where the metropolitan areas are. If you look at the land, most of it is dark. Only maybe 10% of it's lit up, it seems. The rest of that stuff that's dark, that's the woods at night. That's what that is. That's, the boonies. That's where these things are. Just because we don't see them all the time in our environment doesn't mean that they're not on this planet somewhere. They're just 100% indigenous. Basically, they're not affected by us or education or anything by any means. I mean, they're totally off the land. And they would really have no need to come into our areas. I do think that people have found them dead before. I do think people, that kind of thing. I just think they're covered up. And I think that things like that we just don't hear about. And when we do hear about it, it's usually from a source that's not like prominently out there in your face. Just like in David Platy's case when he went looking for answers and he had to go out there on his own, going from library to library, doing all the research. Of course they have records on all this stuff. They're just not willing to share it. And they have their reasons why. And I'm sure if we knew some of their reasons why they don't want to share it, that would answer a lot of questions for us. At least my whole life, that's been the government for you, so what can you do?
Oh, sure. When you think through what would happen if these things were ever proven to exist, it only makes sense that the government would want to sweep this under the rug, so it's not surprising. Do you have any closing points you'd like to make, Kevin?
I think that people will continue to have these encounters and experiences. I think that as time goes on, we will learn more about it. I would say if you're going to go way off in the woods, just make sure that you got some kind of, doesn't necessarily need to be a gun or anything, but maybe take somebody with you, maybe, protect yourself somehow, especially if you go camping in state parks, right? Watch your kids. And of course, we're on Facebook, Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society, so feel free to give us a like and check us out. That's what I have to say.
So that you know, Kevin, I'm going to create a link on dogmanencounters.com. If you go to the resources page, you'll find a link to the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society.
Also, what I was going to do is I was going to post on Dogman Encounters on Facebook, like on the group page and whatnot. Like the David Platy's interview that was on Coast to Coast is a real good one. I think that's really when people really started noticing. Because again, there was someone who actually was able to go on a forum that's pretty well known. I love Coast to Coast. I think, and there's so many other like Dogman Encounters and other radio shows out there that really that are really searching the truth out. It's quality listening. It really is.
Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time and coming on the show here, Kevin. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been great.
Oh, I definitely enjoyed it. Well, don't be a stranger, okay?
Okay.
Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.